and welcome back to the most humble wrestling podcast on the internet. I'm your prosaic host, Tim Empire Blickhickey, and with me I have...
This is Roger, the only babyface who can get more heat than John Cena Fisk.
And how are you today, sir?
I'm quite well. We're ready for another great retrospect here in the annals of professional wrestling.
Awesome. I just want to thank everybody if you've been out there listening. Once again, we are Sunday Night Smarkdown. You can find us on, where can they find us, Raj? We are at retconners@gmail.com. We accept all trolling at that address. You can ignore us on Instagram at retconners, and you can block us on Twitter also at retconners. We can also be found on Facebook at facebook.com/retconners. Raj, what do we have in store for this week?
Well, today is going to be our first WCW pay-per-view. This is the Great American Bash of 1990, which aired on July the 7th, 1990. And this was main evented by Sting challenging Nature Boy Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight Championship. And since this Sunday is Night of Champions, in which Sting will challenge Seth Rollins for his first WWE World Heavyweight Championship, we thought it'd be great to see to review Sting going after his world title in WCW.
Well, aren't we just some witty people?
We are, aren't we?
We are. See, and there goes all the humbleness just straight out the window. So what led up to this match, sir?
Well, Sting, if some folks may recall, was actually a member of the Horsemen. I believe it was in late 1989. And then in February of 1990, Sting was involved in this angle where, he was a big up-and-comer of the group and, getting this big fan following. And Sting felt that he had earned a shot at Ric Flair's world title, which, if you're a Horseman, you don't do that. Ric Flair is King Supreme in the world of the Four Horsemen. So in an angle, they beat down Sting and kicked him out. But the funny thing and almost ironic thing about it is later in the match, there was a steel cage match in which Sting climbed the steel cage to try and get involved and actually legitimately cracked his patella, which put him out of action for a few months. So they had to move it between, instead of giving Sting the world title shot, they gave it to Lex Luger. WCW management had wanted Flair to drop the title to Luger, but Flair said, no, I promised Sting I would drop the title to him. So we're going to wait till Sting gets better, and then I'll drop the title.
Interesting. Flair gets a lot of flack sometimes for some of the politics he moved, but that's nice to hear that he actually kept his word on something. Now, the same part of me, I wonder if keeping the belt on himself till Sting was healthy enough to drop it too. I wonder if that played a part in his thinking. Where are we on the network, sir?
If you go to the network, you can start it at 2 hours, 23 minutes on the nose, and you'll see announcers a young Jim Ross, good old JR, sans the cowboy hat, and Bob Caudle. And Bob Caudle is an old-school WCW announcer and play-by-play man. If you go back and watch the network and watch some of the original Starrcade and pay-per-views that led up to him, he's involved in a lot of announcing and a lot of backstage interviews.
Very nice, very nice. Well, you want to count us in, sir?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, cue you up. As I said, 2 hours, 23 minutes, and in 3, 2, 1, play. And another stipulation of this match, this is also, as you know, Horsemen were notorious for interfering to make sure that Flair always kept the title. So in this one, Sting got a little stipulation involved in which this team called the Dudes with Attitude, which consisted of Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, JYD, the Junkyard Dog, let me see who else was in there, and the Steiner Brothers. And they were a stable called the Dudes with Attitude. Way before, about 5 years before Shawn and HBK chose that moniker for their tag team.
I love, as he's walking down to the ring, I love the American flag jacket he's wearing, the American flag war paint.
Mm-hmm. It does. It gives you a little patriotic feel, doesn't it?
It does. WCW was always real good for that.
True. Hey, Sting played it to the hilt. It's not called the Great American Bash for nothing.
Yeah, and he had a little bit of a pyro coming down. I was actually really surprised to see that because we saw the Saturday night main event last week, and that was 88. So, I mean, it's just 2 years removed, but they obviously now are already using pyros.
It seems at this point WCW is like getting on like the pop culture bandwagon, if you will, because would you say it's safe to say it took WCW not a long time, but it took them a little while to like catch up to the WWE way of thinking of moving professional wrestling?
I think it was always a conflict of interest between the two. I don't think WCW/NWA, I don't feel like they ever wanted to. I think they looked north and saw what Vince was doing and had a certain disdain in their eye. Obviously, that was competition. They didn't want to acknowledge them whatsoever. And I think in a certain manner of respect, that actually even flowed into their booking and production values. They saw what WWF was doing, and they just, whatever they were doing, we didn't want to do. We were serious about wrestling. It would be like if they existed nowadays, it's almost like what TNA attempts to do. They champion the word wrestler. They champion the word belt. They don't believe in sports entertainment. Even when it came to their booking angles, even back then, I sometimes feel like some of their angles were real messy with their dusty finishes and the schmoz endings and everything. That, I mean, I guess WWF can, employed them too, but they wanted to do things a little bit more traditional. I would imagine behind closed doors, they truly believed that what Vince is going to do is going to eventually put him out of business. He's going to push things too far. We're going to stay at home with what we're comfortable with. Once he's out of business, we'll be the only game in town, and we'll be successful doing things our way.
To your point there, here we have the debut of El Gigante, which WWE, WWF fans may unfortunately remember as the Giant Gonzalez.
WrestleMania 9.
Yep. And this dude was almost 8 feet tall, and this was a stipulation here. Now, Ole, although an original member of the Four Horsemen, was not an active wrestler at this point, and the other stipulation, besides Sting getting his crew on the outside, Ole was handcuffed to El Gigante, and so Ole couldn't interfere either. They see El Gigante taking up both chairs, and come on, Willie, take a seat.
It's so nice to see as this match gets started that, you're looking 1990. This would have been, you said July 7th, so this would have been a few months after WrestleMania 6.
Correct.
So this
yes.
would have been, just look at these two guys. Like, Flair has, without a doubt, admitted to taking steroids. And, Sting can say whatever he wants. I've never heard him say one way or the other. And on the outside of the ring, we see the Steiner brothers right there, and we know, we don't know, but we know eventually Scott probably dabbled in it.
Yeah, why his Scott was so much smaller there? I don't understand it.
Yeah, he looks normal. But it's nice to see that these two wrestlers, Flair and Sting, they look normal. They don't look super beefed up. They don't look, they look like athletes. They don't look like Warrior and Hogan look. When was Vince's steroid trial? That would have been 92?
That sounds right, yeah. I think 92 sounds right to me.
So that's when, at like his heyday, that's when he got caught. So God only knows how long it was going on. And during that time period, you had Hogan, you had Warrior. You just had these massive beefed up. We all know Vince's idea of what a champion looked like. And these two don't look like Vince's idea of champion. But at the same time, here they are main eventing a pay-per-view and looking damn good, doing it.
You know what you were just saying about Flair and how this is just after WrestleMania 6 of the Ultimate Challenge. In a way, this is the WCW of Hogan Warrior, because you got the blonde world champion defending against the painted challenger.
Oh, that's a fantastic call. I didn't even think about that. And the same idea, Sting is the up-and-comer, Flair's the established old blood, the kind of a changing of the guard. I wonder, though, very much, after WrestleMania 6, there's stories and stories upon stories about how Hogan was supposed to take a step back. He wanted to do more TV. Whether Vince had talked him into it or whether he was doing it under his own volition, Hogan, it was supposed to be a legitimate changing of the guard. And the problem is that for whatever reason, Warrior in my opinion, it's because he's a one-dimensional character. It didn't take with the fans, and it didn't quite go over. I wonder if, obviously Sting ends up winning this match. I wonder if this was also supposed to be a changing of the guard that didn't quite take place. Because Sting did stay at the top of the card, and he's the franchise. He is WCW more so than even Flair, who would leave here in a few years. But
he would actually leave the next summer because he debuted in, I believe it was August. It was after SummerSlam 1991, because that's when Bobby Heenan was doing the whole big angle of the Real World's Champion and carrying around Flair's belts and all that. So yeah, it'd be just about a year after this.
But Sting was still there. One of the things I always found, I was such a WWF fan growing up. I would watch WCW almost with like a curiosity. Mm-hmm. It played on TBS. It played at very weird times. There was a Saturday night show that WCW ran, whereas WWE or WWF had the Saturday morning show, right? Saturday morning or Sunday morning, and then the occasional Saturday night main event. So I would watch it almost like to get my wrestling fix, but I didn't follow it as much as I didn't particularly have like favorite characters. It was almost like watching, when I watched WWF, it was like watching my favorite sports team play another team. And this was almost like watching two teams that I didn't particularly have a rooting interest in, but watching them play each other and hoping that maybe I'd see a good game. But there was always certain things WCW did that just confused me because, and one of them was this rampway that they had that comes right up to the ring. Mm-hmm. Like it's level with the ring. Just a few minutes ago, they were wrestling on it, and I never understood that as a child. I couldn't figure out why they would have that.
But and to your point, like I've always loved wrestling, and I didn't really care, growing up. That guy, just tried to follow both, but I was also more of a WWF guy than I was a WCW guy. Was your argument for or against the rampway there?
It just was a curiosity to me. I didn't understand the purpose of it, and even now, as we're watching this, I don't really get why they did it. It seems dangerous almost.
I believe it wasn't Bill Watts' idea, because I think Bill Watts came in after this. But the idea was, as they're utilizing it now, just an extra space for the wrestlers to keep wrestling on. But there have been a few accidents. I think there's been a few times when people forgot the ramp was there and walked and fallen off it by mistake.
I believe it. It's certainly a possibility. It just seems very strange. But WCW was full of stuff like that. That again, like we were kind of speaking earlier on, I almost feel like they did stuff just to differentiate themselves from WWF, almost in the same vein as TNA doing the six-sided ring. They just wanted something maybe that looked different, so that if you happened to turn it on, you knew you weren't watching the up north promotion. We do our own things down here, sort of thing.
I always loved that too. Back in the day, they would always say, "Well, you could go to that promotion down south, but we don't know that place is a joke." And then WCW would say, "Oh, you come from up north, you don't know how things work down here." And I'm like, well, then just say it. Everybody knows what they're talking about.
Well, actually, to that point, I actually never knew what they were talking about for the longest time. I didn't understand as a 8, 9, 10-year-old. It was probably, goodness gracious, I was probably 12 or 13 before I figured out where corporate headquarters were, where base of operations were. Here Flair is working that leg still. His ring psychology has just always been top notch.
And give it to Sting. Look at the sell job by Sting. These are two very good partners in the ring. They knew, you guys to give it to. And another side note here, this isn't their first meeting. I believe their first meeting was actually in 1988, the first Clash of the Champions, in the match that they say went an hour, but I think the real time is 45 minutes. They went to a 45-minute Broadway. And Broadway, for those who don't know, means a time limit draw.
Yeah.
And Sting putting the move on Flair, putting Flair's hold figure 4 on him. I always love that too. Like, if you use the move on the other guy, it always seems to hurt him more. It's like using his special against him.
Yes, yes. You would think, though, another thing that's always baffled me about that was if somebody puts you in your own move, you know, just thinking like almost in an MMA sense and like a fighting sense, like you would think that you would know the best way to counter it. But you're absolutely right. It always ends up being the other way. Like you get put in your move and you end up selling it worse than the other guy does. Like
maybe it's because they've never experienced their own hold before. Like, you know,
or the sheer power, like, oh my goodness, this does hurt.
Yeah. Says I've been doing it. No wonder I've won 16 world championships.
Raj, one day I want you to watch every Ric Flair match ever, and I want you to let me know when Flair has ever successfully went to the top rope and come off and hit a move.
You know, I can name just a couple right now.
Oh wow, please.
Yeah. Okay. I believe it's the very first Starrcade, the Flair for Gold, when Flair took on Harley Race for the World Championship, and that was how they finished the match. Flair went to the top rope with a crossbody, and that's how. And well, the finish of the match was he went for a crossbody. Special referee Gene Kaninsky, I think his name was. When he came off, Race tripped over Kaninsky, who was taking a ref bump, and Flair beat him with a crossbody at the top rope.
Terrible finish, but
it did look pretty bad. But for 1983, I think it was. It was 83 or 84.
I'm sure that was a death-defying stunt then.
And this was not only was was at the finish, but this was also Flair's blade job. He's blood crimson mask at the end of the match too.
It was one thing I read Flair's book a few years ago, and by a few years ago I mean maybe 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. And I feel like he addresses his hair in there at some point, just like why he's always bleached it. I have to believe that in some form or fashion, though, his heavy reliance on blade jobs plays a part in it. Because there is nothing in this world like a Ric Flair blade job. And part of it has to do with his hair. Part of it has to do with the fact that he's got, especially in these days, he's got that bleach blonde, sloppy hair that just intermixes with that blood and sells the blade job even that much more. You know, speaking of which, though, can you think of any Sting blade jobs?
Ooh, there's a tough one. Did he ever blade when he was the Crow? I kind of want to think maybe he did. But
that would have been about when, I mean, that kind of came into fad, you know, even when WCW was bringing all the ECW guys in. I mean, that's maybe when he would have done it, but did he? I can't. God, this is when we need Mike.
I can't think of it exactly at the top of my head, but I figure every wrestler has bladed at least once or twice in their career, so I can't imagine Sting's never bladed.
Yeah.
But that'll be something to research too. How the Flair military press bump.
Sting is underappreciated in his just like sheer strength at this point in his career. Absolutely. For being such a small guy, it's almost like Rollin-esque with the small frame but ridiculous amount of strength. Not that Flair's a particularly like hefty guy to lift up and hold in that maneuver, but I mean he does it with the ease of like Warrior, whereas Warrior is clearly his ability is a little enhanced, should we say?
Just a tad.
Yeah. This was something that I don't know if I noticed it when I was younger, but having gone back on the network and watched a few WCW matches, especially these like earlier ones, there's not a lot of rest holds. These guys go
really
at it. It's almost like when they need a powder, they almost like work it in quickly and just out of the picture, you know, like the opponent will taunt, the person will, they do something other than a chin lock, other than an arm bar.
Well, it's been going for the Scorpion.
and Flair is just having none of it. That was a terrible sell job by it. He's not wrenching back on it. It just kind of looks sloppy.
Yeah, you know what? I thought Sting was only doing this in recent years. Oh, here come the Horsemen. You know, where he was where he was just, he doesn't sit back on it, but I guess he's always done that the way it looks here. Maybe it's not hurt the opponent as much. I don't know.
Maybe Flair's bad back didn't allow him to take that the way it is. Because even Bret Hart always tended to, it's almost like to the opponent, it would depend on how far he wrenched back. Like his sharpshooters on Shawn always looked awesome. But when there was when there was
Bret always sat down on it. Like Sting didn't.
No, not at all. But again, maybe that has more to do with Flair rather than Sting, because it's almost like a Chris Jericho situation with the Lion Tamer, or the Walls of Jericho. I mean,
We're in WCW. You can say Lion Tamer.
Yeah. When he first brought that out,
there's your devastating move. Oh, you could not beat him with your devastating move.
I'm telling you.
No schoolboy pin for Sting.
No.
Oh, wait. I always love this move. You never realize how hard it is to do that move, that bridge, I guess you'd call it, unless, it looks so easy, but you try doing that, you get your friend on top of you, and you're just like, all right, lift. He's like, I am lifting. It's a lot more difficult than one would suspect.
Yeah, it's definitely a move that you got to do in concert.
Oh, well, that was a bad camera angle.
Yeah.
They almost missed Sting hitting the turnbuckle, which is like a big turning point in the match. Yeah.
Speaking of turning point.
1, 2, 3. Is that 3? He got him.
That just amazes me that this match just ended on a small package. You would think if they were
the most devastating move.
It might be if you. I mean, it just won Sting the World Championship. But, I mean, if you're really going to change the guard, think about WrestleMania 6, I mean, think about the hell or high water Hogan and Warrior. I still, to this day, think that it's my second favorite Mania main event. I mean, that match is booked so well. So well. So even down to, Warrior, questioning the gods and, thinking.
Getting mixed up again. Questioning the gods is WrestleMania 7 with 7.
That was 7 against Macho.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Which is another amazing match. But what does he do during that match then? There is a moment in that match where he gets frustrated or confused or because
Hogan?
Yeah.
There was a moment where Earl Hebner took a ref bump, and both guys didn't hit their finishers, but they hit like a devastating move. Anyway, and just real quick here, this is kind of odd. Why is Sting walking back? Why is he celebrating in the ring?
Because you got to use that fancy ramp way.
Oh, he's got to stand underneath the pyro. Okay, I get it. We paid thousands for this pyro. You better stand under. Or maybe they're just trying to wrap up the pay-per-view. It's like, hurry up.
Oh, wow. I like the Rusev flag drop.
Man calls. That's another thing I always loved about, is that, wow, is that me? Am I on fire?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that a good thing that I'm on fire or a bad thing? JYD, Rick Steiner.
See, it's amazing. I never, I guess, realized how much. Because you even mentioned Paul Orndorff's on the outside there. How much talent we always talk in the late '90s. How much talent WCW poached. How the Radicals, Jericho, how people who eventually became disenfranchised with WCW came back. Even Sean Waltman. It's amazing to see, even in the early 90s, how much talent was going back and forth. JYD must have basically just came over. Paul Orndorff obviously just came over. And within, a year or two, you just said Flair's leaving. Obviously, the Steiner brothers are about to leave. I mean, there was a decent amount of talent going back and forth.
Absolutely. I touched on the dudes with attitude, they were called. There's something I just noticed in this match. Ric Flair never once got the figure 4 on Sting.
Not successfully, no. He tried, 2 or 3 times?
One could, this was kayfabe, Sting baited Flair into it, kept kept saying, kept kicking him off and kicking him off, and oh look, now he goes for the figure four, and Sting goes for the small package, and now Sting comes back to the ring. Yeah,
JR looks so young, so healthy,
and healthy. Yeah, that's.
Well, that was a fun match. That was absolutely a fun match. I can't imagine that was their best match. I know the Clash of Champions match is talked about endlessly as being just one of their, individually one of their best matches, like per competitor. But I know they had a string of matches in WCW, not to mention the last match on Nitro.
They were always good dance partners, if you will. They knew each other real well, and they complimented each other, and they worked off each other really well.
Yeah. Well, that ends that match, but we are not done for this week. Raj, we have a pay-per-view. This is going to be the first pay-per-view we've had since we've been doing these pods. I believe the first Sunday night SmackDown we did was after SummerSlam, Mike and myself. You had a brief cameo from a car somewhere in the Sahara.
Yeah, my Bluetooth wasn't working too well there.
So we'll be recapping the pay-per-view this Sunday night, but any thoughts going into the pay-per-view?
Well, any interesting number of things could happen. First, talking about Seth Rollins, who's going to do double duty that night. I'm hoping, and I do get the feeling because he, as good as he's been, I mean, just watch that SummerSlam match with Rollins and Cena, there's probably still, and there is not really doubt, but he's not, something about him doesn't scream world champion yet. Not on the caliber of, I'll even say like Triple H or even Batista, like, oh yeah, like this guy's a threatening world champion. I don't know if it's, I mean, he's a great wrestler, don't get me wrong on that. I don't know, there's something about him that doesn't scream world champion, and hopefully with this double duty, and I think he's gonna wrestle his ass off, and I don't expect him to play slow, to lay low in either of these matches, and I think he's going to give it his all for Cena, and he'll definitely give it his all for Sting, and it all depends. I could see him losing the title back to Cena, and it could be even like a quick tap out, and then he could say, oh, I'm concentrating on the world title. This is the one that matters to me.
Of
and
course.
I could see him losing the world title and maybe losing the U.S. title and holding on to the world title. But in the same token, I don't think they would want Sting to lose 2 straight pay-per-views. So maybe he could lose both and maybe try to regain both at Hell in a Cell next month.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by this booking. I was thrilled by Rollins' victory last pay-per-view at SummerSlam. Or was that right? Is that when he won it?
Yes, SummerSlam.
Okay. Great. I just thought it was a great decision. I thought maybe, to your point of him not being viewed as a world champ, in my eyes, I think he is. Mostly because I just feel like there's tons of these, like, quote-unquote pundits out there that are saying that Cena has been the wrestler of the year so far this year with his open challenge. And my biggest problem with that is with Cena, I see it as an issue of, you hear about sports teams who play, a good sports team with lots of talent who plays down to their competition. So they'll play a team that's nowhere near as talented to them, and maybe they take them a little, they don't take them as seriously, or they go easy on them, but, late in the game, they find themselves in a ridiculously tight situation that, inevitably they probably pull out. But there's no reason with the disparage, the difference in talent, why it should have been close in the first place. And I almost feel like Cena does the same thing, but in the opposite way. It's almost like when he is in the ring with a Shawn Michaels, when he's in the ring with a CM Punk, when he's in the ring with a Rollins, he has these amazing, amazing matches. Mm-hmm. But then when he's in the ring with a Sheamus, he almost comes back down in talent level and has a Sheamus level match. Rollins, I don't think, has that problem. I think he could, just like the famous saying used to be with Flair, I think he could wrestle a broomstick to a 5-star match.
Mm-hmm.
I think his mic talent has just improved tenfold since where he was when he was with the Shield. He is my favorite thing about Raw every week, whether he's throwing some sort of hissy fit, whether he's with J&J Security being super cocky, even when he was interacting with Kane. I find him endless. I could just watch him for 3 hours interact with people backstage. I view him as a major main event talent, and in my eyes, he is probably the best world champ, probably since Punk. I know there hasn't been a whole lot of people in between the two, but I think he's doing a lot what Punk did. He's thriving on the mic. He's putting good matches out there, no matter who he actually wrestles. And I think a lot of it's just booking with him. They want to do that chicken shit heel thing they did with Edge, but they can't quite figure it out. And then you've got the Authority kind of weaving in and out of his angles. You know, they're with him, they're supporting him. He's the chosen one. He's the future. And then all of a sudden they're backing off and being like, you know, hey, you handled this. You got yourself into this mess. You're going to get yourself out of it. Hey, we built you a statue, but somebody steals it. We're not going to help you get it back. It's wishy-washy booking, and I'm just a little confused by it. I am firmly sitting on the fence. I have no interest in seeing Sting win the championship. I'm not a Sting mark, so I could care less if he ever gets a championship. I don't think there's a need for like a body of work championship for him to earn, you know, just so he says he can have it. I feel like WWE needs to be in complete future mode right now. Every decision they make needs to just be with an eye towards the future and building talent up. If I was them, I would just throw money at Sting and say, you are going to job to Rollins, and then after that, you're going to job to Wyatt, and then after that, you're going to job to Reigns, and then after that, you're going to job to Taker at WrestleMania. I don't care about his legacy. It is all about the future right now for them. Other than that, I don't care if Cena gets the U.S. belt back. I read somewhere that they're putting his T-shirt back into circulation. If we get reports early at the pay-per-view that they're selling that T-shirt, I would assume he's going to get his belt back.
Oh, the U.S. champ this year?
Yeah. Other than that, there's really not a whole lot on the card that I'm interested in. I feel like the Divas match has kind of been telegraphed. Yeah, there's not a lot going on at this pay-per-view that has me super, super excited. I'm kind of happily interested in seeing who the mystery partner is. Ambrose and Reigns actually did a really funny, I don't know if it's on the network or if it's just on WWE.com, but they do a really funny Renee, or maybe it's Eden. Somebody's interviewing them, asking them about who the third person will be, and they just start, like, bragging on the situation. And they mention, like, Savio Vega and Great Khali. They pull some names out of the air where it's just clear that these two are not just wrestlers but wrestling fans, because they're using names that chances are a writer didn't just hand them and be like, hey, mention these. Like, they use them in context, and it's pretty funny. I recommend you check it out. Is there anything else on the card you're excited for?
Absolutely. Ryback versus my boy Kevin Owens.
Really?
Because I'm what a big Kevin Owens fan that I am, and yes, I'll even say I'm a big Kevin Owens mark. And I think, you know me a long time. This is probably the first guy who's supposed to be heel that I've been behind 100% since he's come in. Usually I'm the babyface guy, but I've been a fan of this guy since 2011 when Mike and I happened to catch him. It was a PWG, a Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and ROH show that was here in Los Angeles. And he was this was my first introduction to him, and he was a heel at the time. But I thought this guy was just one of the funniest wrestlers I've ever seen. And for his size, he's extremely agile, extremely talented. And I've just been a fan of his ever since then. And I would love to see Kevin Owens take it from Ryback.
Do you think he's going to, or do you think because this is basically the first match in the feud, it's just going to start here and maybe in 2 or 3 pay-per-views?
I think it'll start, and then we'll see how it goes, because I've also read reports that they're kind of, like, even after the Hot Cena feud that Owens had, they're probably going to calm down on him a little bit, but he still gets a great reaction, even though he's heel. He doesn't necessarily. Well, that's not true. He does play heel, but he still gets like a sweeter reaction from the crowd. I think the fans still like him.
Oh, absolutely. I really feel like he's the sort of guy that could. It's been a while since we've seen wrestlers do this. Oftentimes we see wrestlers show out for pay-per-views, which, I mean, that just makes sense. I mean, and good on them for doing that. But he's the sort of guy, along with Cesaro, that seems to try just as hard on Raw and SmackDown as he does at the pay-per-views. He doesn't have a handbrake. He doesn't know how to slow it down. It's almost like his style is his style. And any match he's in, he's just going to wrestle that style. And so I would really, really like to see, almost like what Cena did with the U.S. belt, that if they really, really want to push the IC title again, get it off Ryback, for the love of God. I know people out there like him. I know Mike even likes him. I can't stand him. I don't see any redeeming qualities in him whatsoever, other than just being a physical freak of nature. But I would love to see even a title change on Raw instead of a pay-per-view. Make this a quick feud. Make it 2 pay-per-views with a Raw title change in between the 2, and then get him out of that feud and get him into a feud with somebody else. But let him really shine on a weekly basis on Raw. He doesn't have to have an open challenge. He doesn't have to have a gimmick behind it. But let people, he has that, it's almost like an ECW Dudley sort of situation where fans who even like him love to talk shit to him and get a rise out of him because he gives it back.
Oh,
I think even USA Today did something about how he was going after people on Twitter. And I really like seeing a heel do that through social media. I think it's a brilliant way to get over your own brand. But, I mean, that's also kind of what Kevin Steen was known for. You know, he gave it back to the fans. And so to see that maybe at Raw, to get that rise out of people, to see him just on a week-to-week basis really push himself onto people, whether they love him or hate him, but get that reaction, you know?
Yeah, and I don't think they should ever turn him, you know, they should let him keep this course. You know, don't make him completely heel. I mean, yes, he's more heel than face, but just let him write this. I don't think they should ever turn him 100% babyface.
The only reason they should ever turn him face is so that his eventual heel turn will mean that much more.
That's true, yeah.
You know, that is the only thing. If Sami Zayn comes back, you know, maybe start turning him face, you know, like patting him on the back, and then do the exact same thing they did in NXT, do it again on the main roster. Have him just absolutely destroy him. That's the only reason they should ever turn him face.
That's true. Yeah, then that would work beautifully and be like, oh, you all fell for it. You all thought this was, you all thought this was the real me, but this is the real me. And I'd still cheer him because I love the guy. He's awesome.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Well, I think we need to wrap it up for this week. I appreciate you joining me. I appreciate all you guys out there listening. One more time, we can be found on Facebook.com/Retconners. We can be emailed or trolled at retconners@gmail.com. We can be ignored on Instagram @Retconners, and we can be blocked on Twitter @Retconners. If you guys have any suggestions, we're still kind of in the early phases of this. Please, we'd love to hear your suggestions. And just interact with any listeners out there. Raj, any parting thoughts?
No, I just hope we won't have to retcon the Sunday's pay-per-view.
Absolutely. All right, guys. We'll catch you on Sunday after the pay-per-view. Until then, be cool.
Be cool.